we can know him. He has revealed himself to us. We have been set apart to follow him. This is a call to faith, to perseverance, to know and follow him. In confidence, we declare that nothing is better than Jesus.
Well, good morning, BBC, this morning. Did you feel that beat, that jam, right? Don't worry, I wasn't going to sing it at all this morning, but I really think that song by Ella Black, that chorus, I need a dollar is what I need, can really capture some of our feelings when it comes to our financial kind of status, our money, right? Wish I just had more of it. Who doesn't want more money? Just wish that I had more money. And so not only does his song really captures that sense that like when I think about my finances, I wish I could do with a bit more than what I have in my life. But then he also then goes on in the song to actually describe certain sort of scenarios and circumstances that I think that will resonate to so many of us in the room. Especially in these past 2 difficult years that we've had. And so listen to it as Mr. DJ gives us the tune again. Let's go for it.
Bad times are coming and I'll reap what I done sow. Hey, hey. Well, let me tell you something. All that glitters ain't gold. Hey, hey. It's been a long old troublesome road. And I'm looking for somebody come and help me carry this load. I need a dollar, that's what I need. Hey, hey. Well, I need a dollar, that's what I need. Well, I don't know if I'm walking on solid ground, 'cause everything around me is falling down. And all I want is for someone to help me. I had a job, but the boss man let me go. He said, I'm sorry, but I won't be needing your help no more. I said, please, Mr. Boss Man, I need this job more than you know. But he gave me my last paycheck and he sent me on out the door. Well, I need a dollar, that's what I need. Hey, hey. Said I need a dollar, that's what I need. Hey, hey. And I need a dollar, that's what I need. And if I share with you my story, would you share your dollar with me?
Sure, if I share with you my story, would you share $1 with me? And we'll take them dollars, right? Give an high exchange rate as well, right? And so some just real stuff that people are going through at this moment that makes us really cry out for more, that we just wish for more. And so what do I do? Where do I turn to for more? Where do I find what I may be needing right now when it comes to my finances? And so believe it or not, but God actually gives us an answer. Now, it won't be the answer we may want to hear, but it is the answer that we need, that will really satisfy our souls. Because when it comes to money, there's actually a formula if we're looking for one. A formula that God will give towards us in how we should actually deal with and treat money. And it is simply this, that you ought to avoid something by choosing to make a choice, trust, and have some guts. And so avoid, choose, trust, and have some guts. And so come with me in Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. They've given me, now I see it's 15 minutes. It was 20 minutes last service, but now it's 15 minutes to get through 40 minutes worth of content. And so just strap in. We're in here for a while. Like just deal with it. So verse 5 of Hebrews chapter 13. Keep your life free from love of money and be content. Be content with what you have, for he has said, that is God, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? And so when it comes to money, there is something we ought to avoid by choosing something in the moment because of someone we trust in, leading us to lead gutsy lives. And so starting with point one, simply avoid love of money. You ought to avoid the love of money. Now, in love, we know whenever anything that has a pre-usage warning, so there's a warning before you use it, are usually dangerous stuff, right? Even though they are enjoyable or even pleasurable, but we ought to actually take care of those things if there's a pre-usage warning. And so you've never been warned about a glass of milk or a cup of coffee, right? Why? Because not much harm can be expected from those things. But when it comes to alcohol or certain mates, yeah, it is quite understandable that we will be warned against these things, even though they may be useful or even prove to be enjoyable. And so the same applies when it comes to money biblically. And so for something that we actually really need for our lives, something that will bring great joy to our existence, you would think that God will prioritize guiding us to find more. Instead, high on God's priority is a warning to us when it comes to money and possessions. And so Luke 12, for example, Jesus says, keep your life. Luke 12, and he said to them, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. Why? For one's life does not consist in the abundance of his or her possessions. Again, the Apostle Paul speaking to in the book of Timothy, he writes this and he says, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. And so the scriptures are full with such warnings, which then should tell us that when it comes to money, we're dealing with something that's quite dangerous in how we will look to handle it. Now, let's just be honest for a moment. How many of us really found that easy to believe? That you're here this morning really believing that if you had all of Elon Musk's riches, it would be a dangerous thing for you to have in life. Not many of us, right? Right? That's not how we approach money. In fact, it is precisely because we think that by having more of money, it will lead to safety and no danger, that we actually covet the fortune and riches of others, right? And so we want more money because we think that in having more money, it leads to a far more secure life. And so that's why we crave and we desire to just have more money, and will pursue it at all cost, and hence a love of money because of the comfort that we think that money will deliver to our lives, to our lives. And so that's why we would pursue it at all cost. But Hebrews is actually warning us against this pursuit, this love for more. As it says to us in verse 5, keep your life free from love or money. From love or money. And so what is love of money? How do you define it? Because it is quite a somewhat hard and abstract concept to have to define. And so after much reading, here's how I would define a love of money. It is simply the pursuit for more of it, because you believe it secures some things in your life. It's a pursuit for more of it because of what you believe that it will secure in your life. And so driven by that desire for security in money, that if I somehow have more of it, then it leads to life and abundance and all things. And so this world that we live in the eyes of this world, the surest way towards financial security is what? Having more money. Having more money. And so that's why so many of us pursue this, have a love of money because of what's been dangled in front of us, saying to us, this is what you actually would have if you have more of it. Freedom in your life. But actually notice what this verse actually says. It says this, it says, keep your life free. Free from love or money. There's a freedom to be had for sure. But it is not down the path of having more money, this verse is saying. If we are to keep our lives free of the love of money, then implied is the opposite if we don't in that verse. That actually you're being enslaved, held captive, if you pursue a love or have a love of money or money. And so it's bound to, so the very freedom that you're looking for in life would evade you in a love of money. Now, we've got to distinguish here between needing money and loving money. Because we need money if we're to live. And God is not against that. Now, how do we know that for sure? Because He has created a world where money is a means of exchange for us to actually get the commodities that we need to sustain our existence. And He actually instructs us on how to manage money. And so God is not against you doing what you need to do in order to earn or have the money that you'll need to meet your needs and make ends meet. But we are to guard against loving money. And so what is loving money? It's all about greed. It's no longer about just making your ends meet anymore. It is pursuing money because you already believe that in it will lie the source of your life, lies the source of satisfaction, lies the source of contentment in money. And so your pursuit at all costs must have this thing. That's what we're being warned to guard against. And so we ought to avoid finding ourselves in our lives being trapped by the snare of a love of money, while also recognizing that we need money if we are to live. And so then the question then becomes, how do I tell whether I have a need for money or a love of money? How do I tell? Now, the good news is you can do more than just tell. You can actually choose. You can actually choose, which I found so liberating because I don't want to wake up one day finding myself all trapped in a pursuit or a love of money and I didn't even know it. And so you can choose. And so keeping your life free from the love of money, we are told, is a choice that we make, continuing the next part of the verse, to be content with what you have. Be content with what you have. And so if you Google the word content, you'll find these various definitions. In a state of peaceful happiness, willing to accept a particular thing that is to be satisfied, accept as adequate despite wanting more or better. And so we're being told in this verse, be content. That is, be satisfied in what you already have. And so contentment is actually a choice. It's not just something you stumble into, but a choice you're endeavoring to actually be satisfied with what you have. And so you can take, because a love of money is not just something that rich people ought to struggle with. Because if loving money is a desire for more because of what you think money secures for your life, then both the rich and the poor alike can suffer with the same thing. A desire for more money because of what you think it secures in your life. But yeah, in this verse we're saying we guard against that by actually being content in what we already have. And so you take the power away from money ruling your life by choosing to be content in what you already have. So many of us have so much that we're not content in anymore. And no wonder that because we take these things that we have for granted, we are not experiencing contentment. And so it evades us in the things that we have. Oh, we may be sitting here and saying, oh, but I don't have a love or money problem because, I'm not like those rich people, right? I don't have those kind of riches. Those people have, and for whom that then becomes a problem in how they will actually live lives content in this world. But listen, friends, that's not how you tell whether you have a love or money problem in your heart. You don't tell by just looking at how much you have. Here's how you tell whether the love of money, a pursuit for more money, is actually a problem in the life by the degrees and depth of contentment you have in what you already have, or by the lack of contentment you're experiencing because of the things you do not have. That's how you tell whether you're actually somebody who's not being governed by this desire for more, in pursuing to have more. Actually, how content are you? How content are you in what you already have today? About 4 Sundays ago, Stephanie and I, my wife and I, were actually in a conversation where we were trying to arm wrestle one another. She's in this room, so she doesn't know that I'm going to say this, but we were arm wrestling one another about a particular financial decision. So I wanted this particular thing, and still do, and she doesn't yet know it, but she'll come around to warm up to the idea. Wanted this thing that she thought was absolutely a waste of money. And she was started to complain, and we were having this conversation in front of some of our close friends who we are not afraid to be transparent about our finances. So we are having this back and forth, and she's complaining, incensed that I would even consider having this thing because of how often I complain about her spending habit, which as a husband I have never been guilty of, right? Over my wife's spending habits. I never have ever complained on it. But anyway, so there she is complaining about this thing. And then she pulls out what I term as the wife's ultimate trump card. You know what that card is? Appealing to the well-being of her children. And I say her children because that's how she described them when she threw this back at me by saying, so now my children must go without so that you would have that particular thing? And so I want to respond to her and say, first of all, who are these children of yours that I know nothing about? To whom I am the most despicable human being for not considering their well-being in this equation. And so I said to her, really, girl? Really? You want to really pull that one out? That these neglected and underprivileged kids of ours who live in this house in the northern suburbs with all that they have, they are the ones who have it rough and can't afford to actually, sacrifice a little bit more so that they will be content. Now, I retell the story with jest, but it actually led to a good conversation with those friends, that couple that are friends of us, as we began to just reflect about contentment. And how often we take things for granted in our lives. And so then we are harboring deep within a lust and a longing for more and not content in what we already have. Now, as an aside point, and this one I give it to you for free. Everything else I'll say you'll pay for before you exit. Just free bit of advice. Have friends. I recommend have Christian friends with whom you can be transparent about your finances with. Friends who know how much you earn. They know how much you earn. They know what you spend it on. So that you can be transparent with when it comes to your finances. Friends, Christian friends, who will be reminding you that your money is something that God has given you to honor Him with. And be reminding you of that. And so invite their scrutiny into your finances so that they'll keep encouraging you to be a good manager and steward over the things that you have. Because you see, the individualism of our culture trains us, teaches us to actually deal in secrets when it comes to this area of our lives. We keep it in the shadows, what we are doing with our money. And then it is precisely in the shadows that the idolatry and greed of our westernized culture can actually grab a hold of your heart and your habit as well. And so invite the light of your Christian friends into that area of your life so that they can be reminding you, be faithful to what God has placed in your hands. I've got friends in this church, who, if I were to pull up in that car park with a certain car models, they will actually be saying to me, pulling me aside and say, hey, Chief, take it back. Take it back. Because we both know that you don't have enough money to afford that. Friends who encourage me to actually watch what you're spending on. Are you being generous in what you give? We've got friends in the church. So one of them actually helps us with our tax returns. And so a few years ago, I actually pulled me aside and said, sure, buddy, I think you're earning enough to be doing a bit more towards your retirement. And I was like, yeah, right. And so I was like, oh, buddy, retirement, I'll worry about it tomorrow. And I was like, no, I think you need to be thinking a bit more about what you're doing with your money when it comes towards that. Not only have I got friends like that, but I am that kind of friend to some of them. And so a few months ago, I was out with one of them, and he wanted to buy this particular thing, and I was like, I think you better call your wife on this one. And he was like, nah, don't worry, she'll be like. I was like, you do want to sleep under a roof tonight, don't you? Call your wife. And true as Bob, it led, as he called it led to actually some healthy conflict in between them, which then later just exposed some areas where actually, for both of them, they could be more wise and more content within the things that they have. And so that's free advice. Now, back to what you'll pay for later. Now, maybe some of you're sitting here this morning and you're thinking to yourself, you're saying, sure, but I already have so little. So you're saying to me this morning that I should be content with lack. Friends, to you, I would say, I'll reiterate this, that of course you should be desiring what you need. Of course you should be desiring what you need. God is not against you desiring food, shelter, education, whatever you need. You should be desiring that. But what this verse is warning us of is that even in our need, it's not just when we have an abundance, but even as we're pursuing our needs, be careful. Guard against allowing greed and idolatry to now to take over. And so now you start to pursue more. And it is no longer about need, satisfy need, but like it's just having much. And so this is important. You don't have to have all your needs being met before you will choose to be content. You don't have to have all your needs being met before you choose that I will be somebody whose outlook towards life when it comes to my finances is to fight to be content with what already God has given me. Another question could be, you're sitting there thinking, well, then what do we do when it comes to the finer things in life? Like a holiday or eating at a nice restaurant. Am I lacking contentment if I choose to partake of those things? My answer to you will be, I don't know. I don't know where that line of contentment or discontentment may lie in your life. But what I do know is that there is a line. Will you endeavor to try to discern where that line should be held, where you should draw that line? And when it comes to the finer things in life, where's the line? Look to discern that in your life. Now, to help towards that, I want to give us this morning, suggest to us 4 principles 4 principles that you can actually wrestle with as you're looking to actually choose contentment through the various circumstances and scenarios of your life. And so principle number 1, distinguish between needs, wants, and desires to actually adjust and prioritize your behavior. Now, I'm indebted to actually Gary R. Collins, who's dubbed by some as the father of Christian counseling. And so in his book on Christian counseling, he actually differentiates between these terms in a way that I just found helpful. And so he describes needs as purchases necessary to provide food, housing, clothing, medical care, transportation, and other basics. Wants involve choices about quality. I just love that definition, that qualifier. Choices about quality. And so whether I get a used or new car, whether I eat a burger or a steak. And so choices about quality or what wants are, and then desires or choices spending surplus funds after other expenses are met. And so distinguishing as you're fighting to distinguishing between what are my needs, what are my wants, what are my desires, can actually be helpful in helping you discern where that line of contentment can set in what you're thinking about doing as you look to distinguish that in your life. And so that's the first principle. Second principle to suggest to you would be this: pursue contentment in being who God has made you. Pursue being content in who God has made you. And so meaning that you ought to pursue being content and healthy holistically. And not just keep pursuing what our capitalistic and consumeristic world says that you should have more of. That you should have more power, more success, more popularity and security. And so we pursue after those things. And so thirsting after having more and more of those things can actually lead you now to a place where you're prepared to sacrifice some of your spiritual, emotional, and physical health in the pursuit of those things. Instead, we ought to be people of God. We ought to be people who find greater contentment in being who God is calling us to be. That is far more worth it to us, to be the kind of people that God is calling us to be, and in that process, be rich in Christ, than fighting or pursuing to try to become a richer version of ourselves according to the world standards, and then in the process, lose our vibrancy, our first love for Jesus Christ. And so, got to be asking ourselves, am I prepared to be ordinary in the eyes of God, and extraordinary in the eyes of the world? I really do believe that if you were to look at our culture and look at the busyness of this city, Joburg, and how we are after in chasing what we are all chasing after in the city, I really do believe it needs to be said to our generation that we won't all attain the heights of capitalistic success. We won't. So free yourself of that burden in your life. Now, I'm not saying that there are some that are just destined to have-nots, to be have-nots. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying to us is that it is far more worth it to us to be rich in the eyes of God than to be rich in the eyes of the world. And so we just chase at whatever cost that will come in our lives. Now, it's not just capitalism that's a problem. Any financial whatever thing will be a problem, but I'm speaking about that because that's what our culture is bought into. That we must all be CEOs and entrepreneurs, be world-renowned and wealthy by our 30s, and be movers and shakers in our field of expertise. Free yourself of that burden by choosing rather to be who God is calling you to be. God is calling you to be. And so this morning I would ask you, what do you want more of in this world? To leave your mark in this world, or to glorify Christ? Now, granted, the two don't have to be mutually exclusive, but this is very important. They are not interchangeable. They are not interchangeable. It matters which one you place first, which one you are prepared to be more content in having than the other. And so choose to be content in who God has called you to be, to glorify Christ through that. Third principle, invest in what you already have. I really believe that that's the key to greater contentment. Invest in what you already have. You see, because we don't accept what we may already have, it's what then leads us not to invest in it. And so then we lack contentment in the things that we already have. And so because we are always constantly looking for more, because that's the yearning of our consumeristic culture, right? The yearning of beyond consumerism is I want. And then no sooner than you get, you already are longing for more, because that's what you're taught. You got to keep I want. And sometimes we want more whilst consuming what we've just have gotten. We're already looking, setting our gaze for more. And so we don't invest in the things that we have. But by actually investing in the things that we have, it helps us not to be constantly looking over the fence at what we will always perceive to be greener than where we are. And so then desire to want to be there, then actually labor to invest in what God has already given. And so would you build around your life habits that will keep reminding you to accept, keep reminding you to invest in what you already have, so that you will grow content in it. Number 4, cultivate the habit of giving up one thing for another. Cultivate the habit of giving up one thing for another. Because that yearning of consumerism, where I want, it also trains us to realize, to actually be a kind of people who are desirous of far more things than they are able to be satisfied with. So we're always in looking on, I want more, I need more. But by cultivating this habit of actually, whenever I want something, I'm prepared to actually ask myself, what am I going to give up to have that? Of equal value, or even maybe in the same realm, so that it might check me where that line of contentment needs to be drawn in my life. Helps in that. It's a habit that I found so helpful in my life, in actually helping me be content with what I already have, so that whenever I look at something and I want to have it, I ask myself, what am I prepared to give up in order to get it? And oftentimes you realize, I'm actually good. Now, just to be sure, I'm talking about material things and money. I am not talking about trading in or trading out your spouse or your kids. So don't leave here today saying, pastor said I could with my marriage. I did not say that. Don't be putting that stuff on me. I did not say that at all. But here's an appropriate example. So I've applied the same thing to my wardrobe, for example. Limiting the things that I wear, so that I just will not have more things hanging in my wardrobe that I actually don't wear, that I don't actually get to put on at all. And so whenever I see something I may want, I then ask myself, well, what is in my wardrobe that I would want to give up in order to get this thing? And then oftentimes I found myself being saying, you know what, I'm actually good with the shirts I have. I'm actually good. I don't need that one, even though I know that I will make that shirt look good. I don't need it. Don't really need it. And on occasions when actually I'll end up actually going ahead and actually purchasing that, it is one of the most freeing things you could ever experience in the world. When you say, that comes in, but this goes out. This goes out. And it's not always the old stuff. Sometimes stuff has been sitting there for years because you really thought it would be, you will always have that occasion that you're at now, and you find yourself years later and it's brand new. So giving it away. Giving it away. Because here's the thing. Here's why it is so freeing to do. Because here's the thing that our consumeristic world doesn't tell us. And it is this, that excess is burdensome. Deceives us into thinking that excess leads to grace. No, excess is burdensome. When you have too much, then you can actually use. You're constantly reminded about the fact that you're not using it as you should. And so then that leads you then to feel all of the weight of ownership without any contentment or happiness in it, because you just know, I'm not using it as I should. And so excess is burdensome. And so practicing the habit of actually giving up something for another, even if it's a small thing, even if it's a trivial thing, it actually helps you build the discipline of actually realizing that I'm actually happy in a lot of things that I have. I don't have to have that one thing, that other thing. And so being content in what you already have. And so the choice of contentment, to be people who make the choice of to be content, is actually based upon God's provision of our lives. Look at the end of verse 5. For he has said, God, I will never leave you nor forsake you. That is almost the equivalent of God saying, you know what, when it comes to finances and possessions, I've got your back. I've got your back. And so we ought to be a people that trust in the God who watches and provides for you. Now, maybe some are sitting here this morning and saying, buddy, if you really knew what I'm going through right now at this moment, how long I've been praying to God to do something about it, how can you really say that he's got my back? How can you really say that he's got my back in this? And so, friends, that's what I'll say to you. In that one statement, there are certain hard truths we need to grapple with. Hard truths that we have to wrestle with. And so the first hard truth in that statement is this, that God has always been beyond every bit of provision you've ever had. You have to wrestle with that truth, that God has always been beyond every bit of provision you have ever had. If you don't believe me, look at Acts 17. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, skip to verse 25, is not served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And so, friend, you should not have a view of your life that says to you that, oh, I've been able to bring myself this far already in my life. Now it's time for God to shape up and actually come and act in the moment where I need him. Not at all. Every bit of provision you have ever had provided for in your life was made possible by the hand of God. Whether it was much or little, possible by the hand of God. And so don't allow your present lack then to begin to sow in doubts of God's providing hand towards you. He has been faithful. And so we need to be a people of faith who realize in that statement that, man, God has always provided for us. Despite what we may feel like we're lacking in this moment, to cling on to a faith that God provides everything we've ever needed. Why? Because there's only ever been one God in the universe. And that passage tells us it is the God who provides everything we could ever need. The second hard truth we must wrestle with is this, that God has not forgotten about you. in times of drought. He has not forgotten about you in times of drought. Now, I know that might be tough to accept in whatever circumstance you may be finding yourself in, and I'm not trying to belittle it at all, what you may be going through. Recognize it, that it can be real, that it is right there staring you in your face where I am in need at this moment. And so what I want to do is just simply say, as real as that is to you, brother, sister in Christ, there is also another reality over here in that statement where God says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Now, that statement is always quoted by Christians all the time, but like God has spoken those words in the context of finances. In the context of material possession, He has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And so there's got to be another reality. I know that perhaps a deposit or some cash in hand will go a long way right now for you. But there is also another reality that you possess. And it is of a God who has placed His own character on the line by saying to you, I will never leave you, nor forsake you. And so if He leaves and abandons you, then He is not a God that can be trusted at His word. That guarantee should actually be deemed something more valuable than just whatever amount you may be in need of right now. Now, I want to press us here a little bit, because if that's the guarantee of God of our lives, I want to press us here, maybe on two different sides, or where we can land up now taking that verse to mean, well, if He has promised to never leave me nor forsake me, then nothing but abundance must come my way. Because that's how we then end up interpreting the provision of God. That we know that God is being good to us and providing for us because we're getting to feast. But that's not the provision of God, necessarily. Now, you may say to me and say, yeah, buddy, it's easy for you to say, because you just talked about your wife and your kids living in the northern suburbs. Yeah, it seems like God has favored you. You work in Bryanston. And so, yeah, easy for you to say, but what about me and my shack? Me, who has been unemployed. Me, who don't know that. Why does it seem like God has favored you more than He has favored me? Friends, that's where we got to wrestle and say, listen, God's provision, the Son of God's provision of our lives is not the abundance of things that we have. Who has ever said that? That you know that God is providing for you because you're getting to swim in luxury. It's not true. The Son of God's provision in your life is how He's providing what you may need. That's it. And so we've got to guard against comparing and thinking. And I don't speak from a place of privilege. I've known, and I'm quoting now the Apostle Paul, I've known how to have little and I've known how to have much. And I think that's probably the reality of most of our lives. That when it comes to finances, it is an up and down kind of journey. We find ourselves sometimes having more than we need, less than we need. Now, granted, some people have far less than we all may have. Right? But we've got to fight to see the provision of God in those up and down is still somehow giving us what we need. That's the sign of the provision of God in our lives. Now, also we got to guard against, like I say, because we think it might be if God provides and He says, I will never leave and provide you. Again, we're expecting nothing but feasts, nothing but we would have plenty. Guard against that prosperity gospel. God hasn't guaranteed through that statement that I will never leave you nor forsake you. He's not guaranteeing that you will always have abundance. And you want to know why? Because God is not just committed to provide what you need, but He's also committed to sometimes grow you through your need. And so that's why He's not fazed in allowing you to go through the need. Because He wants to grow you in times of need. And so just because God has said He'll provide for us, it does not mean that you will not go through times and seasons in your life where you are in dire strait and in great need. I was just reminded this past week about a missionary family who have their roots in BBC, about the time in their lives when they were serving in a particular context, missionary context, and they will be ministering, and oftentimes, sometimes without food. And so they would gather at the end of the day, sitting around the table and wondering where dinner or supper will be coming from. And then oftentimes, by the grace of God and through His provision, there'll be a knock at the door. And then they open the door and there will be standing someone within the community they're ministering to with 2 eggs, bringing for their family supper. And their mom will take it, whip it into something to feed a family of 5. Now, in that example, how far does 2 eggs go in a family of 5? Not very far. But is it the sign of God's provision? Absolutely. And so just because God has promised to provide, it doesn't mean that He will always give us what we need for tomorrow, today. He may just give you what you need this moment, as you trust in the God who watches over your life. Now, as we trust in this God, or as we wrestling, or maybe let me give another example, because just to just press this into our heart. Remember the widow with the 2 copper coins, right? Jesus was observing the rich coming and depositing large money in the temple coffers, but then this widow comes and she puts one of the smallest contribution of them all. But then Jesus remarks in Luke 21 saying, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty put in all she had to live on." And so Jesus is teaching here, is saying that God doesn't measure our gifts by their size, but He measures it according to actually the sincerity of our hearts towards Him. And so this widow gave out of that heart. All the scriptures, Jesus tells us, she had to live on. And not once do you hear Jesus says, but don't worry, guys, there's a happy ending to that. She was guaranteed more. Later, that's why she was able to give all that she had to live on. Never says it. And so how does a widow, one of the most vulnerable people in their context, ends up giving all that she had without that kind of guarantee? The answer is the widow who trusts in a God who watches and provides for her. That's the answer. Those 2 copper coins were His in the first place. It's about giving it back to Him. All I'm saying, God, I trust You that You will never leave me, nor forsake me. And that I'm more satisfied and content to have than any of this world's riches. And so to be a people who avoid love of money, but actually choosing to be content as we trust in the God who provides for us, it leads us then to be a people who have guts in the fearless stewardship of our money. Got to have guts in that. Why? As Hebrews tells us, so we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? That's guts. That's guts when it comes to your finances. Now, what does that look like in particular? I think the Apostle Paul gives us a clue of how this guts, having this kind of guts is supposed to play itself out in our lives when he advises Timothy to charge the rich with this charge. Now, we may not all be rich, but as I read it to you, listen out to how actually you will find The same kind of guts that the Apostle Paul is calling the rich to have is the same kind of guts that widow displayed. And so this call is then for us all, despite our financial circumstances. So the Apostle Paul saying to Timothy, 1 Timothy 6, verse 17 and onwards, says this, he says, as for the rich in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, not to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasures for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is truly life. And so to be somebody who has guts, you live fearlessly stewarding your finances, do good with it and good works. Be generous and ready to share, because that's how God will provide for some of those who are in need in our midst. Have that kind of guts. Why? For the Lord is your helper. You will not fear. What can man or this world do to you when it comes to your finances and material possessions? Again, the service, I feel like Sandy, I wanted to ask you to come up and just pray for us. Pray for us as a community, that God would just help us be the kind of people that live this out well.
Father, I am so challenged by the power and the truth of your word. That you're so right, Jesus, when you say that if you know the truth will set you free. And then you go on to say your word is the truth. And so today we have heard the truth about our own hearts, which are so easily captivated by the love of money. You know us so well, Lord. You know how so easy it is for us to trust in riches and in money, thereby drawing our hearts away from you. And you warn us against the snare and the stronghold of the love of money. And you say this, God, for our joy and our peace. And then, Lord, I'm so thankful that you are so utterly faithful. And that your promises and your provision are based in the person of who you are. And so thank you for today's sermon. Thank you that we can be utterly assured that everything that we have been given so far comes from your hands, and everything that we need going forward will come from your hands too. Help us to live trusting in you in light of that. Help us to live joyfully as we steward our money. Help us to have eyes and ears that are open to the needs of people who don't have. And then, Lord Jesus, I'm reminded that the ultimate provision of God came in your person as you died on the cross. And God, you provided a way for us to be reconciled to you. That is the ultimate provision. And so we thank you for who you are today, in the midst of a tough sermon like this. So God, we offer our hearts to you and ask you to do the work, whatever it is that you need to do in our hearts on this topic. But we want to end off triumphantly today saying that you are utterly trustworthy and thankful. And for that we thank you. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.